Well, welcome back, folks. I have the cylinder back from being bored. Actually, they did it in the same day. I dropped this off about 9:30 in the morning. They called me towards the end of that day's business and said the cylinder was done. I ran up yesterday and picked it up. So we're about 2 days after I had first talked about this. But it's done, and it cleaned up really well. Let me see if I can get a light here for you. See if you can see that the cross hatching there a little bit. Here's the piston. Again, first over, you can see the arrow, I think right where my finger is pointing. And that, of course, fits to the exhaust side when the engine is assembled. But we've got a nice, comfortable, but tight fit. And in addition, they relieved the ports. Now, on a two-stroke, it's real important that the transfer ports in the cylinder wall here, that you can probably just see right there, are relieved and not left with a sharp edge. Because what will happen, and I think that occurred on the Yamaha Wild 1, if you leave those ports sharp, the rings can catch on those and it can do catastrophic damage, as it did on the Yamaha. It blew apart the top of the piston. Blew this piston ring land right out, and you have to relieve those ports. And the folks that do my boring work, they are a high performance engine builder in the area. They do a lot of marine engines. They do a lot of two-strokes. Been doing my engines for years. I don't even have to tell them, of course, what to do. They take it. They know exactly the routine, which includes relieving those ports so that they're not sharp. So they've got nice radius edges to them. I've also, just a short time ago, I cleaned up the surface here where the head gasket is and the head fits. I just did that on my surface plate. I've talked about that before. You don't have to have a surface plate to clean up this kind of surface. You would typically use a nice, maybe a thicker piece of glass on a nice flat surface. You can just tape a piece of emery paper down, or 400 or 500 grit sandpaper, a nice big sheet, and then you just put this upside down like this, and you move it around, usually in a figure 8 pattern, and just do a nice resurfacing. So I did that myself just a few minutes ago. And then on the bottom here, this is where it meets the engine cases. I just cleaned that up with some soft, it wasn't really emery paper, it was more like a scouring pad, so I did that myself as well. So this cylinder is now ready for paint. Now the paint I'm going to use for this project, and I've used this before, it's probably my favorite cylinder paint, and that's the VHT. This is very high temperature. It's rated allegedly to 1300 to 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, or 704 to almost 1100 Celsius. That's hot. I've used almost every brand of cylinder paint, high temperature cylinder paint known, and this is my favorite. This does need to be baked in an oven. If you read the directions very carefully, it talks about, well, unless you're going to put it on the vehicle and use cycling of the engine, heating of the engine to cure the paint, which I'm not going to do. I'm going to put this in my oven and follow these directions. I can duplicate these directions in my oven quite easily. So this is the paint I'm going to use. I'm going to hit it with a couple of coats of primer, and then probably 2 to 3 or 4 coats of the black paint itself. Great stuff, by the way. Highly recommended. Next thing I need to do now is clean this piece up really well. Even though they did degrease it, I'm going to degrease it again. And then I'm going to mask it. I'm not going to show that. You've seen what it looks like masked. But I will duplicate what I did once before, and that is I will mask this surface, I will mask this surface, and I will mask the port here, the exhaust port, and so that I can take it outside. It's supposed to be a really nice warm day today, be a perfect day for painting, and see if we can't get this done. However, before I paint this, there's one other thing I'd like to show you. Occasionally I get asked, how much does it cost to have a cylinder bored? This is the actual receipt from this project. And it's about what I paid a year or so ago. I think a little over a year ago, last time I had a cylinder bored, and that was the Honda SL125. And I think I paid around the same amount, maybe slightly less. But the cost to bore the cylinder itself was $79 US. They charged me $10 for a block degreasing, shop supplies, tax, etc. It came out to a total of, let me bring this up here for you, $92.18 US. And that's, I think, about going rate around here right now. I think that was actually quite reasonable in today's market. 20 years ago, it would have cost me probably half this amount, but I figure less than $100 US to have the cylinder bored, and they do great work. Again, turned around inside of one day. I can't beat that, so I'm very happy with that. And so for those of you that are curious what I pay for that, there's the actual receipt, $92.18. Now I'm going to go ahead and get this cylinder cleaned up, masked up, and I'll take it outside and paint it. It's a couple of days later now, and I've allowed the part to dry, the cylinder. You can see it right here. I want it to be good and dry to the touch before I move it on to the final stage, which is the curing or the baking. You can see I got it set up over at my oven cookie sheet. The purpose of the foil is simply to keep the cookie sheet clean when I use it for various projects. There's no other reason it's there. I use a cookie sheet to handle a part like this because it makes it much easier to move it in and out of the oven and to handle it without literally having to handle the part itself, especially when it's hot. I can put on a pair of heavy gloves and handle the cookie sheet instead of the cylinder itself directly. Just to reiterate, here are the curing instructions directly off the can of the paint. You can see I have to bake it at 250 degrees Fahrenheit or 121°C for 30 minutes, then allow it to cool for 30 minutes, then 400 degrees Fahrenheit, 204°C for 30 minutes, allow it to cool for 30 minutes, and then the final baking is 600 degrees Fahrenheit, 315°C for another 30 minutes, and then just allow it to cool. My oven doesn't go to 600 degrees. I think the maximum is 550 Fahrenheit, so I'm going to have to make do with that when I get to that third level of baking. You can see I have the oven preheated to 250 degrees Fahrenheit, so now it's just a matter of sliding the part in the oven, setting a timer for 30 minutes. When that expires, pull the part out, reset the oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, After 30 minutes, putting it back in, etc. Doing that for the 3 heating cycles, then pulling the part out and allowing it to thoroughly cool, which at that point will probably take some time. While I'm waiting for the heating and cooling cycles to complete, and we're about 23 minutes into the first 30-minute cycle, I thought I would very briefly touch on why I showed you all those clips of painting of the cylinder itself. Normally I wouldn't show or demonstrate painting. It's fairly academic for most of the folks watching this. But I wanted to very briefly explain my technique. I used these are 1/4 inch all thread. I've talked about before, I keep all thread around. They're 24-inch sections or so, and they were just part of my inventory. I did not have to go out specifically to buy these. In a couple of shoe boxes from, my wife likes to buy shoes, and she saves her boxes for me, and I use them for things like this. And I wanted to position the cylinder in such a way as I could easily turn it. And by either sitting it, vertically like this, it's difficult sometimes to get up underneath the bottom of the cylinder, or vice versa if you flip it over. And I didn't want to manually manipulate the part with wet paint any more than I absolutely had to. So I just used the 2 of the 4 hold-down cylinder stud holes that pass through the cylinder, of course, to hold the head on in the cylinder in place. And I just used these all-thread rods, as you saw in the video, so I could very easily turn the part back and forth and rotate it and get from all directions. I could spray the paint and make sure I had uniform coverage. And at the end, you saw me remove the 2 pieces of all thread, and the reason I did that is I had to get behind with the paint where the all thread essentially masked off or covered and protected behind it the cylinder itself. So at the very end, I just pulled the all thread out, stood the part up vertically, and then did 3 coats or so, I guess, of paint, the black paint, behind where the all thread had covered and protected initially from the paint. That was what I was showing there at the end. So the only reason I showed you all those clips is so you can get a sense of how I handled the cylinder of the part and manipulate it without having to physically. About 4 hours or so later, I've completed the curing of the paint using the 3 different heat settings, and the part has pretty much cooled down. It's just slightly warm to the touch, but certainly, I can handle it, as you can see here, all the way around, what it looks like. This discoloration you see is caused by oxidation, and that typically happens on the highest heat setting. In this case, that was 550 degrees. I'll clean that off. Just once it's completely cooled, I will clean that off of it and just polish it back to the steel look. But it doesn't really hurt a thing, frankly, to be honest about it. I can leave it like this and it'd be ready to go. I think that's going to be it for this video today, folks. Preparing and painting the cylinder. I'll just set this aside now because obviously there's not much I need to do with it until I go ahead and complete the rest of the work on the project, and that'll be months before this is installed on the bike. If I do decide to clean this up a little bit, I'll include a photo somewhere along the way. Whether it will be part of this video or not, I don't know, but eventually maybe I'll include a photo of this cleaned up, and certainly you'll see it as it gets installed back on the bike. So we'll call this video a wrap at this point. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.